Seraphina knew she wouldn't be allowed inside for the coronation. The warning had been clear when the head servant told her to come early to help with preparations, but to vanish before the ceremony began. Albino omegas were said to bring bad luck to sacred events, old superstitions claimed, able to curse a new reign before it even started. So Seraphina did what she always did, worked diligently, kept her head down, and prepared to be invisible when it mattered most. For 3 days she had decorated the great throne room, polishing every surface until it shone, arranging flowers and ceremonial banners with meticulous care. The coronation of the new Alpha King was the most important event in generations, and though she wouldn't witness it, she took pride in ensuring everything was flawless. On the morning of the ceremony, Seraphina rose before dawn, completing final checks and making sure all the candles were lit. Every ceremonial item was in its proper place. Then, as the first nobles began to arrive, she slipped out through the servants' entrance just as she had been instructed. But something made her hesitate. Perhaps it was curiosity about the new king, said to be unlike any alpha before him. Perhaps it was the urge to see, even from afar, the ceremony she had worked so hard to prepare. Or maybe she simply had nowhere else to go, and the stone hallway outside the throne room was as good a place as any to wait until her next shift. The massive doors to the throne room were closed, yet not completely sealed. Through the narrow gap, Seraphina caught glimpses of the ceremony, flashes of formal robes, glimpses of the assembled nobility, fragments of the ancient words being spoken. "Do you like this personality?" She pressed herself against the wall beside the door, careful to stay out of sight, while still listening to the ceremony inside. The throne room was filled with wolves from across the kingdom. Every noble family, every pack alpha, every wolf of importance had gathered for the coronation. The outgoing king's voice echoed as he prepared to pass the crown to his successor. "By the ancient laws and the blessing of the moon goddess, I present to you your new Alpha King. May he rule with wisdom and strength. May he protect the weak and lead the strong. May his reign bring prosperity to all under his protection." Seraphina shifted slightly to see better through the narrow gap in the doors. What she saw made her breath catch. The new king was unlike any alpha she had ever known. Tall and powerfully built, he clearly possessed tremendous strength. But it was his appearance that held her gaze. His hair was not the usual browns, blacks, or occasional blonde. It was silver-white, falling past his shoulders and catching the candlelight as if it glowed. His skin was pale, and from her angle she could see eyes of a distinct light color. He was albino, just like her. The new Alpha King of the Northern Territories, an albino, was sitting on the throne in front of the entire nobility, crowned despite the very superstitions that had kept Seraphina outside. She watched, transfixed, as the crown was placed on his head. He looked strong and confident, bearing the weight of leadership with a grace that suggested he had been born for this. No one in the throne room seemed concerned about his appearance. No whispers of curses or bad luck floated through the air. The nobles bowed and pledged their loyalty without hesitation. So why was she not allowed inside? If an albino could be king, why couldn't an albino omega stand among the witnesses? The bitter irony made Seraphina's eyes sting with unshed tears. She blinked them back and kept watching through the crack in the door. At least she could see part of the ceremony, even if she couldn't take part in it. The new king rose from the throne, his voice ringing clearly through the great hall. "I, Lucian Winterborn, accept the crown and the responsibility that comes with it. I pledge to rule fairly, to protect all wolves, regardless of rank or circumstance, and to challenge any law or tradition that values status over character." The words were standard enough, part of the traditional coronation oath. Yet the way he spoke, emphasizing all wolves and regardless of rank or circumstance, made Seraphina feel he meant them more deeply than most kings ever would. Let all who would pledge their loyalty to the crown come forward, Lucian continued. The nobility began moving in an organized procession toward the throne. Saraphina knew this part would take hours. Each noble family would make their formal pledge, be acknowledged by the new king, and exchange the ritual words that bound them in fealty. She should probably leave, find somewhere else to wait, but she couldn't bring herself to move away from the door. The procession had barely begun when something unexpected occurred. A draft from somewhere in the castle caught the massive doors, pushing one open slightly wider, just a few inches, but enough that the gap Seraphina had been peering through became visible from inside the throne room, and the new king, Lucian Winterborn, looked directly at her. Their eyes met across the distance, and Seraphina felt her heart seize. She should look away, step back out of sight, do anything other than stand frozen while the Alpha King stared at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. But she couldn't move. Those pale eyes held her captive, and she noticed something shift in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, recognition, or something else she couldn't name. Then Lucian did something that made the entire throne room fall silent. He raised his hand, halting the procession of nobles mid-step, and spoke with a voice that brooked no argument. Stop. The single word echoed through the great hall, and every wolf present froze. A noble who had been in mid-pledge stumbled, confusion written clearly across his face. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as everyone tried to understand what was happening. Lucian's eyes never left Seraphina's face as he spoke again. Someone explain to me why there is a wolf standing outside these doors. Why is she not inside with the rest of my subjects? The question was addressed to the throne room at large, but it was the head servant who answered, his voice trembling with nervous apology. Your Majesty, that is just one of the Omega servants. She helped with preparations but was instructed to leave before the ceremony began, as is traditional for... As is traditional for what? Lucian interrupted sharply. Finish that sentence. The servant hesitated, realizing he was about to say something fraught. As is traditional for Omegas of particular appearance, Your Majesty, the old belief suggests that albinism can bring misfortune to sacred ceremonies. The silence that followed was absolute. Every wolf in the throne room stared at their new king, and Albino himself, who had just been told that someone was barred from his coronation for the very same condition he bore. I see. Lucian's voice was cold enough to chill the air. So, let me understand this correctly. On the day of my coronation, my staff decided it was appropriate to exclude one of my subjects from witnessing the ceremony because of superstitious nonsense about her appearance. The same appearance that I share. Is that accurate? No one dared to answer. The head servant had gone deathly pale, realizing just how badly he had erred. The nobles exchanged uneasy glances, each silently trying to distance themselves from the decision. Lucian rose from his throne with smooth, controlled power, and the force of his presence made every wolf instinctively want to bow. That wolf standing outside my throne room, he said, voice razor-sharp. Bring her inside, now. Your Majesty, an elderly noble attempted, choosing his words with extreme caution. Perhaps we should continue with the ceremony first. We can address this matter afterward. I said now. The alpha command in Lucian's voice was unmistakable, undeniable. Bring her inside and bring her to me. We will not continue this ceremony until she is where she belongs, standing among her fellow wolves, treated with the dignity she deserves. The guard stepped forward to obey, but Lucian halted them with a raised hand. No, not the guards. His gaze found Seraphina again through the gap in the door, those pale eyes locking onto hers with startling clarity. She will come on her own if she chooses, without compulsion or force. Then he addressed her directly, his voice still gentle yet powerful enough to fill the hall. You, outside these doors, I am Lucian Winterborn, your Alpha King. I am asking, not commanding, but asking if you would do me the honor of entering this throne room and standing as witness to my coronation. Will you come inside? Seraphina's hands trembled as she processed what was happening. The Alpha King, in the middle of his own coronation, had halted the entire ceremony because she was being excluded. He was asking her, an Omega servant that most nobles wouldn't even acknowledge, to enter the throne room, to stand as a witness, to be treated as if she had worth. She should refuse, thank him politely and decline, stay in her proper place, and not disrupt this important ceremony. That was what any sensible Omega would do. But looking at him, the understanding and something like kinship in his pale eyes, Seraphina found herself nodding. Her feet carried her forward, even as her mind screamed that this was madness. She pushed the door wider and stepped into the throne room. The assembled nobility parted before her like water, no one daring to block her path when the Alpha King himself had called for her presence. Seraphina kept her gaze lowered as she walked, acutely aware of her simple servant's dress, her bare feet, and her white hair that marked her as different. "Look at me." Lucian's voice was soft now, meant for her alone, though hundreds could hear. "Please, I want to see your face." Seraphina lifted her eyes and met his gaze. The expression she saw made her heart race. Not disgust or pity, those she would have recognized, but something else. Something that looked almost like wonder. "What is your name?" he asked. "Seraphina, your majesty," she whispered, her voice barely audible, yet in the silence of the throne room everyone heard. "Seraphina," he repeated, reverent almost. "That's a beautiful name. It means burning ones in the old language. Did you know that?" She shook her head, unable to trust her own voice. "It's appropriate." Lucian descended from his throne, each step closing the distance between them, bringing him closer to where she stood frozen in the center of the hall. Because despite what small-minded wolves might think, there is nothing cursed or unfortunate about our appearance. We don't bring misfortune. We burn bright, Seraphina. We stand out, not because we're flawed, but because we're meant to be seen. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the exact shade of his eyes, a pale blue-gray, almost silver in the candlelight. Close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his powerful body, could smell the scent of pine and winter frost. "You helped prepare this throne room for my coronation," he said. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "You worked for days to make everything perfect, even knowing you wouldn't be allowed to see the ceremony. Why?" "Because it was my duty, Your Majesty," she admitted, hesitating, deciding that if he was going to judge her, it would at least be for honesty. "Because I wanted it to be beautiful. Even if I couldn't be part of it, I wanted it to be something worth remembering." Something shifted in Lucian's expression, and he turned to address the assembled nobility. "This Omega has more nobility in her smallest gesture than some wolves have in their entire lineage. She worked to create beauty for an event she knew would exclude her. She took pride in service even when that service wasn't valued, and she was prepared to stand outside these doors for hours rather than disrupt the ceremony by requesting entry." His voice hardened. "Meanwhile, my staff, wolves who are supposed to serve all members of this kingdom, decided that ancient superstitions mattered more than treating every subject with dignity. That ends now." He looked back at Seraphina, his voice softening once more. "Will you stay? Will you stand here and witness the rest of this ceremony? I want you to see what you helped create. Your Majesty, I'm not dressed appropriately. I'm just a servant. I don't belong." "You belong exactly where I say you belong," Lucian replied, firm but not unkind. "And right now, I say you belong here in this throne room, witnessing a moment you helped make possible. Will you do me the honor?" Seraphina felt tears gathering behind her eyes but blinked them away. "Yes, Your Majesty." If you wish it. I do wish it. He extended his hand. After a brief, trembling hesitation, she placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, a surge of electricity shot through both of them. Saraphina heard Lucian's sharp inhale, and in that instant she understood. The mate bond. That unmistakable spark that bound two souls together. Lucian felt it too. She saw the recognition explode behind his pale eyes, but he didn't speak of it. Not here, not with hundreds watching. Instead, he simply said, "Come, stand beside my throne where everyone can see you, where you should have been from the beginning." He guided her up the steps to the throne platform, every gaze in the room locked on them. Seraphina's heart pounded, aware of how unprecedented this was, how scandalous, how unforgettable. Yet Lucian's unwavering confidence steadied her, letting her lift her chin just a little higher. When they reached the throne, Lucian addressed the crowd once more. "Let this be the first decree of my reign. No wolf in my kingdom will be excluded from any public ceremony or gathering based solely on their appearance. Albinism is not a curse. It is simply a variation in our kind. Anyone who perpetuates these harmful superstitions will answer to me personally." He turned to the outgoing king, who had been observing the exchange with barely concealed amusement. "My apologies for the disruption, Your Majesty, but I needed to make this clear from the very start of my rule. May we continue?" The old king smiled, approval in his expression. "By all means, Your Majesty, though I suspect you've already shown everyone here exactly what kind of king you intend to be." The coronation ceremony resumed, but everything had changed. Seraphina stood beside the throne, visible to all, while Lucian completed his formal ascension to power. The nobility, who had initially looked scandalized, gradually appeared thoughtful, as if reconsidering everything they thought they knew about rank, worth, and value. When it came time for the nobles to make their pledges of loyalty, more than one glanced at Seraphina with new respect instead of dismissal. Old prejudices wouldn't vanish overnight, but Lucian had made it unmistakably clear that they had no place in his kingdom. After what felt like hours, the formal ceremony concluded. The nobility began to move toward the great hall for the coronation feast. Lucian remained on his throne. When the last noble had departed, he finally turned to Seraphina, his expression softening with relief. "Thank you for staying," he said quietly. "I know that was probably overwhelming." "Your Majesty, I should be thanking you. You didn't have to stop your coronation for me. You didn't have to challenge centuries of tradition because one servant was left outside." "Yes, I did." Lucian's voice was firm. "Because if I had let it pass, if I had allowed that injustice to stand unchallenged on the very day I became king, then I would have been no better than every ruler who came before me, who did nothing to change unfair traditions." He stood and stepped closer, and Seraphina found she couldn't bring herself to retreat, even though protocol likely demanded it. "Besides," he continued, "the moment I saw you through that door, I felt something I've been waiting my entire life to experience. You felt it too, didn't you? The mate bond." Seraphina nodded, unable to trust her voice. "I've spent my whole life being told my appearance was a flaw I had to compensate for," Lucian said, his voice thick with emotion. "That I could be king despite being albino, but that it would always be something I had to work twice as hard to prove wasn't a weakness. And then I saw you standing outside those doors, excluded from a ceremony meant for all my subjects, and I realized nothing had really changed. The prejudice was still there, just wrapped in polite words and pretty manners." His hand lifted, brushing her white hair with a gentleness that sent a shiver down her spine. "But when I look at you, Seraphina, I don't see a flaw. I see someone who is beautiful exactly as they are. Someone who never needed to overcome anything because there was never anything wrong to begin with." And I thought, If I can see that in you, maybe you can help me see it in myself. You're the Alpha King, Saraphina whispered. You don't need an Omega servant to tell you that you're worthy. Maybe I don't need it, Lucian agreed softly. But I want it. I want a partner who knows what it's like to be judged for something they can't control. Someone who learned to be strong not despite being different, but because of it. Someone who sees past the crown to the person beneath it. Because they know exactly how it feels to be reduced to their appearance instead of valued for who they are. He stepped back slightly, giving her space. But Saraphina, I need you to understand something. I'm not asking you to accept the mate bond because of duty or obligation, or because I'm the Alpha King. I'm asking because from the moment I saw you, something in me recognized its match, my equal, my partner. But the choice has to be yours, made freely, without any pressure or compulsion. I'm just a servant, Seraphina whispered, voicing the fear that had been growing inside her. I don't know anything about being queen. I don't know how to navigate court politics or manage a kingdom. You should be with someone who can actually help you rule, not someone who's only good for polishing floors and arranging flowers. You created beauty in a throne room you thought you'd never be allowed to enter, Lucian countered gently. You found purpose and pride in work that went unacknowledged. You stood outside those doors for hours because you wanted to be close to something meaningful, even if you couldn't fully participate. That shows more strength and grace than most nobles I've met display in their entire lives. He stepped toward her again, his voice dropping to something quieter, more intimate. And as for not knowing how to be queen, neither did I know how to be king when I was born. It's something you learn, something we can learn together. What matters isn't whether you have all the skills right now. What matters is whether you have the heart, the compassion, the strength of character that makes someone fit to lead. And Seraphina, you have all of that. What if I fail? She breathed. What if I'm not good enough? Then we'll fail together and figure out how to do better, he said with a soft, reassuring smile. But I don't think you'll fail. I think you're going to surprise everyone, including yourself, with just how capable you are, once someone finally gives you the chance to shine. Seraphina looked up at him, at this powerful alpha who had stopped his own coronation to call her inside, who had challenged centuries of prejudice in his very first act as king, who was now looking at her like she was precious rather than worthless. I'm scared, she admitted. Good. Being scared means you understand the magnitude of what this means. But Seraphina, I'll be beside you every step of the way. You won't be doing this alone. She drew in a deep breath, feeling as if she were standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to leap. Then yes, she said softly but firmly, I accept the mate bond, the role of queen, all of it. Not because you're the Alpha King or because I feel obligated, but because something in me recognized you too. Because when you looked at me, like I had value, like I was worth stopping a coronation for, I felt more seen than I have in my entire life. The smile that spread across Lucian's face was radiant enough to eclipse every candle burning in the throne room. Thank you, he breathed, pulling her gently into his arms. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes. When he kissed her, the mate bond solidified between them with a force that made the very stones of the throne room seem to hum. This was destiny, Seraphina realized. This was what it felt like when two souls recognized their perfect match. When they finally parted, still glowing with the bond's energy, Lucian rested his forehead against hers. There's going to be gossip, he warned softly. Probably some resistance from traditional nobles who think I should have chosen someone of higher birth. Are you prepared for that? As long as you're beside me, I can handle anything, Seraphina replied, surprising even herself with the steady conviction in her voice. Then let's go to the feast. Let's show everyone that the albino Omega who was left outside the ceremony is exactly where she belongs, standing beside her mate, ready to help lead a kingdom into a new era. They walked hand in hand toward the great hall, and Seraphina felt a strength growing within her that she had never known before. She was done hiding, done accepting that her appearance made her less valuable, done letting other wolves define her worth. The feast hall fell silent as they entered together. Lucian, resplendent in his coronation robes and crown. Seraphina, in her simple dress, yet carrying herself with newfound confidence. The assembled nobility stared, some in shock, others in dawning comprehension, and a few with obvious disapproval. Lucian allowed no time for objections. He raised his voice to address the entire gathering. Wolves of the Northern Territories, I present to you my mate and your future queen, Saraphina Winterborn. She will stand beside me as we work to build a kingdom that values all wolves, regardless of rank, appearance, or circumstances of birth. Anyone who cannot accept this is welcome to leave now. No one left. A few noble families exchanged uneasy glances, clearly displeased, but no one dared to challenge the Alpha King on the day of his coronation. Gradually, nobles approached to offer formal congratulations. Most were polite, if not enthusiastic, but a surprising number, particularly among the younger wolves, looked genuinely pleased. One young alpha even bowed deeply. "Your Majesty," he said, "I think this is the best decision you could have made. We need leaders who understand what it's like to be judged unfairly, who will create space for all of us to be valued for who we are, rather than for what we look like." As the feast continued, Seraphina found herself surrounded by wolves eager to meet her, welcome her, and express their support for the new direction the His kingdom was taking. It was overwhelming, yet in a way that warmed her, filled her, soothed parts of her she hadn't known were wounded. And through it all, Lucian never once left her side. His presence was a steady reassurance that she wasn't facing any of this alone. Late in the evening, when they finally found a moment of relative privacy in a quieter corner of the hall, Lucian pulled her close and whispered, "Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us. I know this isn't how you expected your day to go." "This morning, I was a servant preparing to spend hours standing outside a door," Seraphina replied with a small, incredulous smile. "Tonight, I'm standing beside the Alpha King as his mate. Nothing about today has been what I expected." "Are you happy?" Lucian asked, genuine concern threading through his voice. "This is all happening so fast. If you need time to adjust, if you want to slow down—" "I'm happy," Seraphina interrupted gently, and as the words left her mouth, she realized they were true. Terrified and overwhelmed, and still not entirely sure this isn't a dream, but happy. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. "You are," Lucian assured her softly. "You're exactly where you belong. And I'm going to spend every day proving to you that being left outside that ceremony was the best thing that could have happened, because it gave me the excuse to bring you inside, where everyone could finally see how remarkable you are." As they stood together, watching the celebration of a new reign unfold, Seraphina thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a servant who believed herself cursed to a queen who was beginning to understand that different didn't mean less. She had been left outside the ceremony, excluded and dismissed, told her presence would bring misfortune. But the White Alpha King had called her into his throne room, had stopped his coronation to demand she be treated with dignity, had seen value where others saw only superstition, and in doing so, he had changed everything. Not just for Seraphina, but for every wolf who had ever been told they weren't good enough because of something they couldn't control. The Albino Omega, who had once stood outside in the cold, had become a queen, standing in the warmth of recognition, respect, and long denied acceptance. And the White Alpha King, who knew all too well what it meant to be judged by appearance, had found his perfect match in someone who shared not only his rare coloring, but his courage, his integrity, and his determination to build a kingdom where no one would ever be shamed for simply existing. Sometimes the most important moments begin with exclusion and end with belonging. Sometimes being left outside is just the universe's way of making sure the world pays attention when the door finally opens. And sometimes the person standing in the doorway, quiet, steady, brilliant in ways no one bothered to look for, is exactly the person you were meant to find, all along.